when you talk about this U.S. newcomes after the breakup of the Soviet Union, end of the Cold War, and the whole picture became this what we call the unipolarity. And now we come to this very sensitive stage. From my research and from research of many others, this multipolarity is already there. But multipolar world order is not yet there, it's to be born. So it's a particularly risky process in one way or another. And I myself think, with this unipolarity led by the United States, it's almost like the saying goes, absolute power corrupts absolutely, in its broad sense. As you mentioned, the 7 wars in the Middle East planned by the United States. Yet interesting, if you look at the picture today, the 3 major powers, China, Russia, United States. Russia is involved in the Ukrainian war. That is very controversial. Yet there is one thing I think wins support of many countries and peoples. That is the open statement by the Russian side that we want to overthrow this unipolarity, unipolar world order. So I describe Russia as a revolutionary. China's position is more sophisticated. I describe China as a reformer. But we think this order not that pleasant, but as Deng Xiaoping said, we can make best use of it for whatever good and try to resist whatever is not good. So with US-sponsored, promoted globalization, it's both economic, political, and social, everything. But Chinese only embrace economic globalization, not political. And now, for the United States, during the Biden era and before, it's part of the support of this unipolarity. Yet with Donald Trump, it's changing. It's almost, I would say, if Russia is revolutionary, China is reformer, United States under Donald Trump is abandoned. He's abandoned this old order. He thinks the United States has been hollowed out by this neoliberalism and the color revolutions. Yet from the latest trends, as you may have followed after this Iran bombing, and then this failed conversation with Vladimir Putin, he was talking about 50 days, and then he was talking about resumption of arms supply to Ukraine. So people are saying and discussing, I also want to hear your view. It is just a tactical maneuver, or it's more important change, moving back towards the military complex, military-industrial complex. Or in other words, whether there is any hope for the United States to be somehow freed, or at least with more distance from this military-industrial complex.
First, I use the language, I say that there is a multipolar world, but not a multilateral world. So my own rhetoric is that multilateralism means an international order, a rule of law, the UN Charter, and so forth. And we have a multipolar world because power is clearly in many places, and China, Russia, US, and India, by my count, are 4 great powers. Europe is kind of in between. But in any event, we don't have a sense of how the world should work. And unfortunately, the UN is very weak being able to be the platform that it should be, because the UN was created, after all, exactly to provide a multilateral order. And I view the call for a UN 2.0, in other words, strengthening the UN system, as vital. One of the points that I would like in that is a major UN campus in China. So, because China does not have a UN presence other than its UN country team, but I work in Rome a lot where there are 3 UN agencies. I work in Vienna where there are several UN agencies, Geneva where there are several UN agencies, and there should be a major UN campus in Beijing or Shanghai, and it should be, in my view, the World Environment Solutions Campus, because China will lead the world in solving the environmental crises because of renewable energy, electric vehicles, digital economy, and so forth. So I would like to see a big UN presence in China, and think that that would really help to make a multilateral order. Right now, the UN headquarters is in New York City, of course, on the East River, but the US doesn't have interest. And most of the world has an interest in the UN system. But the US, under Trump especially, but more generally, views the UN as a handicap to imperial prerogatives. So Trump is not an isolationist, of course. What he wants is that the US has the power to boss anyone around. He thinks that the US does. So he says, I'm going to put on tariffs, and thinks that other countries are going to completely surrender. China, on the other hand, said, okay, you put on tariffs, we'll stop the export of rare earths. That almost brought the US economy to a stop. So I don't think the US has big cards in this battle, or whatever metaphor one wants. And by the way, one metaphor that I think is useful, and it's a cliche, but I think it's true, is that Russia plays chess, China plays Go, and the United States plays poker. And what's interesting about poker is 2 things to my view. One, it's a very short game. So you play one hand after another. Okay, we lost that one, we start another war. We do this, we do that. It's not a consecutive, complex strategy. The other thing is it's filled with bluffs. In chess, you don't bluff. I don't think you bluff in Go. But in poker, you bluff. You say, oh, good hand when you have nothing. And so this is a different mentality, actually, of how to play and what is being played. And China's very intricate for the long term, very smart. And Russia's rather strategic also. President Putin is not an impulsive person. He's very calm, very rational. And when you listen to the Russian commentators about the war, it is like listening to a chess analysis, actually. So they are taking their time, and they're making a move on, to H4. And this piece is now under threat. In America, you need to settle this by the next week. You can't have a game that goes on more than one news cycle. So this is part of the challenge. But in any event, we don't have either ordered multipolarity or multilateralism. We have multipolarity without the order and without the sense. And the question is, how are we going to get to it? And I think that if we survive this period without disaster for the next 20 years, things will settle down to have the ideology and the global politics reflect the underlying global distribution of economy, power, and finance. Right now, we're at a disjunction. The power has shifted, but the ideology has not shifted. And the power of the United States in these formalized structures is still greater than its real power. For example, the dollar is still the instrument for sanctions. But 10 years from now, the settlements will be in renminbi, not in dollars, and the US won't be able to enforce its sanctions regime. So, to my mind, it's a matter of time, but big danger during this period of transition. If we can get by this period, things will be okay, because you can't maintain delusion on a sustained basis for generations. You have to come to a sense of reality sometime soon. So what should we do to come to a sense of reality? Of course, China should continue to promote a sense of reality, and I think it does so quite well. But in the world media, it doesn't get heard very much because it's an English language dominated media. So this is one issue. Second, we need to bring young people all over the world together to make a more realistic world than the older generation has. So I think that this is a second major feature. The third is, my view is that China should work with what we call the global majority, which is everything except the US, Europe, and Britain. And that is about 85% of the world. That's good. And China's about 18% of that, so it would be about 67% of the world for China to work with. And most of the world wants good cooperation with China. And the United States has done China a big favor recently. It said, we're not interested in climate change. We're not interested in electric vehicles. We're not interested in renewable energy. And I would say, for China, this is great news. Okay, we're going to make big business all over the world. And this will be our source of growth for the next 25 years. We'll be dealing with all the rest of the world. The US, you go ahead with your tariffs and your this and your that and whatever you want. As long as we could avoid disaster, I think that that would work out okay. And then I believe the United States in 10 or 15 years would come and say, oh my God, we fall far behind. We better get our act together. We better get organized, and we better be more pleasant to the rest of the world.
Great. And your metaphor of playing poker reminds me of a very popular cartoon, which I saw when the tariff war broke out not long ago. Donald Trump holding a lot of cards and said to Chinese leader, you see, I got so many cards. And the Chinese leader said, it's all made in China.